Hi, I'm Jennifer Joseph, your Family and Consumer Science agent here in Hancock County, Mississippi. Thank you so much for joining us for our first Q&A series with Mississippi State Extension, Family and Consumer Science. And today I have with me Miss Qula Madkin. She happens to be our nutrition specialist here at Mississippi State Extension. And thank you so much, Ms. Qula, for joining us.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be the first.
Yay! All right, so today's topic is ways to build a healthy immune system. And with everything that's going on right now, and I'm not talking about pollen season, I'm not even talking about flu season or anything of that nature, but COVID-19. I mean, it's just there. We've heard about it for a whole year now consistently. And with this going on, we constantly get questions concerning the immune system. So I really want to delve into this topic. But the first thing I want to ask, the first question is, what is a healthy diet? Because since these questions are going to be surrounding the diet, especially with immunity, how do you define a healthy diet?
Right. So for me personally, I define a healthy diet as a diet that utilizes whole foods, that provides nourishment. And I think the key to a healthy diet is understanding what nutrition means. Nutrition means to be nourished. So a lot of times people get into this concept of nutrition. They hear nutritionist or nutrition, they think of weight loss. But to be healthy actually means to nourish. And with this topic we're discussing, we really focus on how do we build our body's natural defenses to fight or to be as healthy as we can to prevent illness, or to actually, if we get an illness, to fight back with that illness. So for this purpose, and most of the purposes, I use a healthy diet as defined as being nourished, nourishing your body to do its best.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was such a great definition.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because we want to nurture our body. So many people hear nutrition, and like you said, it's correlated with weight loss, but it's so much more. We should all strive to be healthy. Yes, sometimes that means we need to lose weight, but more so it means nurturing our body so that we can obtain that health. So thank you so much. Great, great. Okay, so now we're going to start with some questions that were previously submitted from our Mississippi community. And also, if anyone is tuning in and you have any questions, please put them in our comment box and we'll get to those as soon as possible. So our first question, what key foods do you suggest for a healthy immune system?
Oh, that's a good question, right? So that question can be a loaded question. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to give you a general idea, and then I want to share some other information because, Jennifer, you know this. For some people, what is needed is going to be different based on what they have, right? So let's just say we're all on a level playing field, which we know that's not always true. Some of our resources are different. But in general, we want whole, unprocessed foods. I want to make sure I clarify this because processed foods doesn't mean it can't be healthy. Because most foods we consume are processed. For example, frozen green beans have been processed. But we're focused on things that are what we would say slightly processed, but kind of in their natural state. So real foods are going to be our best option to build a healthy immune system. I really encourage people to focus on those fruits and vegetables that are very vibrant. Mm-hmm. Same thing I tell little kids when I teach them, vibrant, colorful. Those things are super high in antioxidants that actually help protect our cells and fight things that are trying to harm our cells. So we really want to be nourished with fruits and vegetables, whole grains, if we're going to consume grains, beans, nuts and seeds, protein, those healthy fats. So that kind of builds a base of helping our body to be as healthy as it can, fighting off inflammation and really giving us what we need to be nourished. So I really try to encourage people to stay away from things that are highly processed. So we take a potato, for example. You got a potato on the ground, right? And then you can have a potato that's in a box. So there's a huge difference there. We want to go with more of the thing that comes out of the ground, less of the potato that comes out of a box. And that's what I mean when I say highly processed. If you take green beans, for example, you can have a green bean out of the ground, a green bean in a can, and a green bean in a package that's frozen. They look very similar, right? So yes, there's some process going on there, but in general, those are going to be okay for you. So you're looking for things that are like they would look if you actually picked them or grew them yourself. So fresh, whole, real foods. And then on the other caveat, I want to say this: when our resources are different, it's best to do what we can, because there are sometimes choices we have to make that may not be what people would say would be the healthiest. But what I encourage people to do is utilize what they have that's within their budget, and do the best they can in trying to provide their bodies and their families with the best nourishment that they can.
Most definitely. Thank you. Thank you. So you heard it, people. Let's try to eat whole foods, less processed food. And when I hear processed, one thing really comes to mind, and that's sugar. So can you please just expound on the role of sugar in the immune system?
Right. So this is very important here, because I have a lot of people who will say to me, well, I use honey, or I'll use a certain type of sugar. It's still sugar, right? Now, does honey have some medicinal properties? Old school, my grandmother used honey, my parents used honey. Absolutely, there are some antibacterial properties there. But when we start adding sugar to foods is where we get in trouble. So there are fruits and vegetables that have natural sugar. I'm not saying stay away from those, but what we are saying is added sugar. Jennifer, I think, the sugary beverages, those, even fruit that has added sugar, all the cookies, cakes, and pies, that really gets us in trouble and increases inflammation. And it takes room away from our nourished foods, and we're getting these foods that are not nourishing. So it's hard for our body to utilize those and fight against things when all we're getting are foods that are not as healthy for us. So we are really consuming like 77 grams of sugar per year. That's about 10. Let me see. I've made a note here because I found 10. That's about 10 pounds of bowling balls, right? So we really need to do a better job with added sugar. Okay. It is so easy to access. Everywhere we go, we can find things that have been overly processed and sugar overly added. There's a lot of conversation about, should people consume butter? Should they consume meats? I think it's very important to focus on these added sugars and all these additions to food, because rather than focus on the real food, that's a personal preference. And if you want to enjoy meats and fruits and vegetables, or some people say don't eat whole grains, but I tell people to really focus on those added things like added sugar and added fats that are not really good for us, that are super processed, rather than signaling out or taking out a whole food group. That would be a really good start, because that's where most Americans are, really consuming a lot of processed added sugar, especially our children.
Most definitely. And when you were mentioning the added sugar, this past weekend, I actually went to a local restaurant in the country with my mom, and I couldn't even eat the food because they added so much sugar to the food as they were cooking it. And that leads me to encourage people to prepare as many meals at home as they can. And whenever you're preparing your meals, try to avoid adding sugar to your meals, because you're not adding any nutrient value to it. I mean, absolutely none. It's like it's counteracting it, actually, and it's diminishing what it can do for your body. So just for those out there listening, try to avoid adding sugar to your meals, even when you're preparing them, because you're doing yourself more harm than good. So yeah, that was really good.
Let me add something else, Jennifer, because this is, I think, really important. We have a misperception that the foods here in the South are unhealthy. let's think about our foods. We have an abundance of beautiful sweet potatoes and greens and cabbage and okra and corn. We have a lot of, people raise cattle and all these different things. So if we can really think about our foods, they're actually not healthy. The food, unhealthy, the food itself is not unhealthy. It's the additions. And so some of that is cultural, some of that is familial. My mother, thank goodness, never added sugar to beans or to greens, but I have many friends and family members who is staple. If you cook red beans or you cook some green, people add sugar to those foods. So, that is kind of like encouraging people to understand that they don't have to do that to take the bitterness out, if that's why you're doing it. Or has it become just habit and we've just passed it down from generation to generation? Because having some beans is a great thing. It's what we add to the food that is harmful to the food. So I'm always trying to dispel the myth that our foods here in the South are unhealthy. It's how we cook them and what we add to them, because we have some great foods, really healthy foods. Really high nutrient foods that are traditionally grown here and cooked here. But if we learn how to cook them healthier, that's where we can really see some change.
Yes, ma'am. And just a touch, it's when we get on this subject, it's so much that we can talk about.
Right.
And since we're on it, I just feel like it's a great opportunity to educate. And we often add a lot of fat to our food as well, not just sugar, but fat. And there are different kinds of fat. Some are worse than others, especially when it comes to how much we're consuming. And as Ms. Qula knows, I have a plant-based diet, which means I do not consume any meat or animal byproducts. So whenever I was cooking my beans or my greens and I didn't add any meat, everyone was like, I don't know.
Right, I can't eat this stuff.
How do you eat peas or beans without meat? How do you eat greens without meat? And it's possible. It's all about how you're seasoning your food. And seasoning is key. And yes. I believe that's why the food that I ate this past weekend was so sugary. It's because they substituted sugar for seasoning. And that's not the same thing. It's just not the same thing. You have to actually have herbs, and it's so many other.
Oh, there we are.
Okay.
There we are. We went out just for a second, but we're back.
We're back. Yeah, like we have so many herbs that we can use to season our food with. It doesn't have to be sugar, and it doesn't have to be an excess of salt either. Yes. So, and you may not know it, y'all, but this actually contributes to your immune system. So,
well, I want to say this, Jennifer, over Christmas, we had a blog that came out, an article too, that focused on seasonings. We talked about those seasonings, Christmas seasonings that are actually very healthy for you. And I do want to share with anybody who's watching, Southern Gardening has a lot of great resources. Our Dr. Gary Bachman, he has you can do an herb garden. If you're interested in it, we have resources to teach people how to do that with Extension. So, for some people, it feels like, what are herbs and spices? We only know about salt and pepper. I tell people two things. Go to Dollar General, Dollar Tree, 2 for $1, and start trying some stuff. Buy one a month and just start adding it. These are salt-free. They're dried herbs and different spices that you can start adding and build into your cabinet. And that way you can learn how to flavor and season with these seasonings, and they're not very expensive. So not only does it provide flavor, but it also provides some nutritional benefit and value for using these spices and herbs. So that is something I'm really excited about. With Extension, we have a publication that'll be coming out that is focused on salt-free seasonings. So we're actually going to teach people how to make their own salt-free seasonings to build the flavor, so you don't feel like healthy foods lack flavor, right? So I think if we can get people to think more like that, and just slowly cut back, because I'm telling you, I'm a true Southern girl. My mother used ham hocks and neck bones. And it is still difficult, but I'm learning to not use as much, because what I say to people, it's not that you have to cut it all out. We all have our own preference, right? And our personal beliefs and values of how we want to eat, but we can do better. We can do better. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great point.
All right, great. So now we're moving on to our next question. What other healthy habits help keep the immune system healthy?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about eating. We know food is important. I tell people the second best thing you can do is get some sleep. Now, that is hard for a lot of folks. It depends, your work schedule, kids, the environment you're in, but most Americans do not get enough sleep. So we're looking to really get enough sleep. If we don't get sleep, our body can't repair. So we really, and especially if we're not eating well, we need to make sure our body can repair from all the damage that's been done during the day, just simply going outside, if you have allergies, pollutants. So we want to repair by getting rest. That helps everything work well. People who do not sleep well tend to have a higher weight, higher risk of diabetes, high blood pressure. It's really hard to control and manage illness if you're not resting. Okay. Another thing is to be physically active. We have to be more active. I have been doing some research on the blue zones, which is areas in the world where people live to be 100, and they're actually really healthy. They're not just 100 and laying in a bed. They're healthy and strong, or they're living to be in their 90s and still very vibrant. They are physically active every day, whether it's herding goat, whether it's hiking, it's walking some miles. These people are super active. And it really does matter to be physically active. While we tell people 30 minutes most days of the week, if you have to start with 5 minutes or 10 minutes, these things really help you be healthy, help with the food to build your immune system, to help you fight and be strong as you can be. Other things like getting outside, obviously getting some sunlight. We may have to chat about vitamin D, but getting some sunlight and then just connecting. With this COVID crisis, what I know has happened is we've had a disconnect. My parents live in Mississippi. I live in Mississippi, and they would come visit us every other week or so. With COVID, they haven't been able to do that. That's affected us, myself and my husband, and our children. So I know we've had a lot of disconnect. So mentally, people are struggling. So mental health is also important, trying to fight and be healthy and strong with your immune system. So there's a lot of things we can do to try to stay connected spiritually, meditate, pray, whatever means for you, audience. You really want to try to reconnect with people. And I think this is great that we're doing this through a screen, but we got to really try to find other ways to reconnect that are safe, because of COVID, because I think that's really causing a lot of struggle for people and some depression, which could lead people not to eat as well. And of course, not to be as healthy.
Right.
So those are just a few things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Man, and that ties so much. I can't wait until our topic on mental health, and that is coming up. So if you're interested in learning more on mental health, y'all, we will be touching on that coming in the upcoming months, because it impacts so much. Like you said, if you're depressed, you don't want to exercise, you don't want to cook, and that affects your diet, and you're not getting that adequate sleep that you need, or you're just lying in the bed getting nothing else but sleep. So all of that ties in together. And we have a comment here. Thank you for mentioning mental health, which is rarely touched on, and how it factors into our immune system. Yeah. Thank you so much. And it's absolutely right. It factors so much. That's when you look at the holistic picture. You're looking at the whole body of health and not just singling it out to medication,
Medication or just food. Because let me take that back. Medication or just weight. Because not only do we have a lot of physicians who only talk to people about being overweight, they talk to people about medication as well. So and they don't have a lot of time to just really engage. So thankfully, some of our physicians really refer people out to mental health caregivers or dietitians. We have nurse practitioners who can engage. But we really want people to understand the holistic view of health. Even if you're not on medication, there's other things you can do besides just focus on your weight. Weight loss is so important, but how you get there is important also, because we get people so caught up in trying to lose weight that they do anything to lose weight. Does that mean they're healthy? Not necessarily, right? Does that mean they're healthy if they're what we would consider skinny? Not necessarily. So we really want to encourage, like you said, Jennifer, I think that holistic view of living your best life, and getting as healthy as you can be based on the situation that you have in front of you.
Yes, yes. Ooh-wee. It's so much meat on that bone.
I know. We probably shouldn't go into that bone. We don't need to bite it. We don't bite it. We won't bite it.
We're going to move on. Okay, so to continue on with the immune system, because I really want to tackle that, but I'm not going to. So you mentioned vitamin D earlier, and that makes me think of the importance of vitamin D in the immune system, as well as vitamin C, because we see a lot of people talking about vitamin C, especially during COVID-19. So can you just expound on those for us?
So let me do vitamin D first, because I think it's super important. And we heard a lot on the news about vitamin D. Vitamin D has been, a vitamin that the past 5 to 8 years has really grown in importance and understanding. We know more about it. What I do want to say is this: vitamin D should not be supplemented unless you have talked with your physician and you actually know your number, because you can test vitamin D levels. There's a test that tells you where your vitamin D levels are. So I do tell people that. And let me tell you why I'm saying that. I've talked with a lot of my clinician friends through this COVID crisis, and they've had a lot of people coming in who were actually in critical vitamin D levels as it relates to they were too high, because they started just taking vitamin D without knowing how or where their vitamin D levels started. So you got to know where you are with vitamin D if you're thinking about supplementing before you just start taking it. Okay, so my recommendation is to tell people to get out and get some sunlight. Vitamin D is known as the sunlight vitamin. Sunlight does not have vitamin D in it, but it gets to your skin and your body will synthesize vitamin D or make vitamin D. So that's a great way to get in vitamin D. Wear sunscreen, but you need about 10 to 15 minutes in direct sunlight. People who have darker skin, it's harder for their body to synthesize vitamin D. So that is where you do want to ask about supplementation to see if that's something you need. And that's really anyone you want to ask, because if you're a person that doesn't go out in the sun, you do want to ask to see what is your level in general. So some of us can be lower on the spectrum, but some of us can actually be too high, and that can cause toxicity, especially if we're over supplementing. So vitamin D is excellent. You can get it through foods as well. Those fatty fish have vitamin D. You're a fish eater, but for some folks, you may have to do supplementation. But number one recommendation: do not start taking tons of vitamin D without knowing your vitamin D levels. Okay. Vitamin C, we hear that all the time. Oranges, orange juice, right? Those are our things we see in the media, things we're being told mostly about. Drink more orange juice, eat more oranges. Well, I tell people oranges do have vitamin C, right? But you can get more vitamin C from a bell pepper than you can get from an orange. So when we talked earlier about those vibrant colors, like red bell peppers would be a great addition to your diet. So oranges are great. I'm not saying don't eat oranges, but I definitely would encourage people to consume and eat their vitamin C rather than drink it from juice, because you can get a lot more from strawberries and a lot more from red bell peppers or peppers, and just those fruits and vegetables in general to help boost your immune system. And they have really good antioxidants in them that helps fight and help keeps those cells healthy and protected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. So true. We have a comment here. I had deficiency in vitamin D and had no idea.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so prevalent.
Yes.
That is so prevalent. You mentioned people with darker pigmentation. Yeah. They are more prone to be deficient in vitamin D than any other groups.
And people who are overweight as well.
Yes, ma'am. And people who are overweight. So it's important to know these things, especially if you are a person of color and if you exhibit some symptoms of vitamin D deficiency. And it's good to know some of those things. And I know from experience, and I share my mother's experience of vitamin D deficiency. She was so tired. Mm-hmm. She was hurting, and she couldn't find the willpower sometimes. And it was difficult for us to watch because we knew it wasn't who she was, but come to find out, it was vitamin D deficiency. And sadly, her physician didn't even test for it. I had to suggest to her, have your physician to check your vitamin D levels. Sometimes we do have to be advocates for those around
Yes.
us, or you have to advocate for yourself. And that's why it's good to know this information. And that's why I'm so excited that so many of you are tuning into this so that you can become an advocate for your own health and know that it's all about prevention. It's all about preventive health. You don't have to wait until you get sick to get a diagnosis, but you can prevent that from even occurring by making positive lifestyle changes.
Well, and
Yeah.
Jennifer, I just want to reiterate, like you said, get your levels checked. You can ask that when they run a basic test, which most people go to the doctor at least once a year. Some people are going every 3 months or 6 months. You can say, I would like my vitamin D levels checked. You need to get them checked. So then you know where you stand. I tell people all the time, we have to know our own numbers. But I want to say this, and I think what's at the tip of your fork matters for your health. It matters for your health. I enjoy a lot of things that, I grew up eating that may seem like they're not the best. So you can fit those things in. Our National Nutrition Month theme is to individualize your plate. I think it's important because we've kind of went, myself as a dietitian, and then a lot of dietitians I know really push people to eat things they didn't enjoy, didn't know anything about. There was really no cultural relevance to food and recommendations, because we can't just tell people salad is the only way. That is not true. And like I mentioned, some of our foods here in the South are super healthy. It's just what we're adding to them, not necessarily the food itself. So I want to encourage people to not feel like getting healthier or building your immune system is eating foods you don't like, or not being able to ever eat your mom's gumbo again, because that's not going to happen on my watch. I'm going to eat it, but it means adding more things that are healthier for you. That doesn't mean you are going to be Jennifer, right out the gate. They're not, if the goal is for someone that says, I want to go vegan or I want to be a vegetarian, doesn't mean they right out the gate are going to be able to get to that point. Or for me personally, I enjoy lean beef. I enjoy fish. I enjoy shrimp. So I do eat animal-based proteins, but in moderation. That what works for me. I do also eat carbs in moderation of what works for me. Do I like a piece of good bread every now and then? Absolutely. So I think it's important that we encourage people to know you can do it. You don't have to feel like there's only one way. There's not just one way. It can be done. And I think that's what discourages people, because they think, well, I only can eat kale. Well, that's not true. That's not true.
That's right. You can still eat those mustards and those turnips, because I still do. And they are delicious.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're coming to a close, and I'm going to let you go, Ms. Qula. I have more questions, but I'm going to have to just hold them until next time. But thank you so much for joining us for today's Q&A topic. And thank you all so much for joining as well. And I encourage you to tune in every third Thursday at 2:00 p.m. And we'll have a different topic every month. And our topic for the month of April is going to be physical fitness. And
that's good.
Oh, it's going to be so good. We're actually going to have one of our faculty members and an extension agent to tune in for that topic. It's going to be so good, y'all. I hope you tune in. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great and safe rest of your week. Health State, and go Dogs.
Bye, y'all.